Hi, my name is Melissa Wilson. This is my media clip final for our SPED class. And I went through and I work as a para in the school. I've been there 3 years, and I work as a in the classroom para and as the speech and language services kind of coordinator slash para. And so we're doing something different this year, and we've done teletherapy with our SLP. So I've been much more involved as the speech para this year than in the past. And I also have a son that has autism, so I've had a unique experience as being both sides of the IEP process, and one part as a parent and the other part now as a speech and language on-site coordinator slash para, because I've had the unique opportunity to actually be a part of those IEP meetings, help develop the goals, work with the SLP, hold those meetings, have a lot of contact with the parents, when usually in the past as a para I haven't had that opportunity. So I've got a lot of experience this year with IEPs that I haven't had as a para previously, and I think they've been really beneficial to me, especially with this class, because a lot of the things I'm doing I didn't really know why I was doing. This class helped me understand the why behind a lot of what I was already doing on the job. The least restrictive environment. This has a lot of jargon in it to basically say, to the maximum extent possible, we're going to make sure that students with special needs have opportunities to be in the classroom with their peers who are not special needs, and to as much extent as possible. Our school has done great with this on some aspects, and then other aspects they've not done really great. When it comes to sensory needs and things like that, we've been really great in providing lots of things to keep that child in the classroom with their peers in that least restrictive environment. We provided wiggle seats, we provided cushions, texture, Velcro, um, breaks, headphones, lots of things like that. I know they've done those things for my son. And then also, like, my son gets early dismissal from his classroom. So he'll leave 2 minutes before the bell rings and change classes alone, so he's not overstimulated in that transition process. An area that we're not so great in is that our school has a large number of SPED kids, and we end up pulling them out of the classroom and down into the resource room, and they do math separately, they do reading separately, they do a lot of those core things separate from their peers. Now, I've talked to many other schools, and the way I'm seeing them doing is really dynamic. They'll do like a co-teaching scenario, and they'll have a resource teacher come in and teach side by side, and the kiddos are learning a lot of the same material but at different levels, and they're able to co-teach that and separate a little bit in the classroom in different groups, so that our kids with special needs and academics are able to stay in the classroom in that least restrictive environment, and not pulled out to where they're spending a lot of their time in the resource room. And I've seen several kids who have really suffered this year, and I've seen some social skills really fall this year because of spending so much time in the resource room and away from their peers, and they feel more and more separated, secluded, not a part of that family in that classroom. And then when they go back into the classroom after spending majority time down in the resource room, they're really having a hard time transitioning back into that classroom. And we should ideally be keeping our kids in the least restrictive environment in that classroom whenever possible. And 98% of the time, then this should be happening. The only time that you would have to is if you've tried everything, it's not working, they're a harm to themselves or to their peers in the classroom. There's very few reasons why this should not be happening. The cycle of the assessment process. Research shows that the sooner that we can identify children and get those steps in there to try to get them on track, the better, and the earlier the better. Unfortunately, what I've seen in my school a lot is kids not be identified until they're like in third grade, and then we're trying to do the catch up and get them back on track with their peers by the time they go to middle school, which is an uphill kind of battle that you face when these kiddos should be identified a lot earlier. um, what happens is you'll have, if a parent can do a referral and ask for testing and for their child to be looked at, or the teacher can. And sometimes I have even had a referral given to me, like the first referral, actually I had one this year come from the librarian regarding a student for articulation. And that was the first that I've ever had, but it just shows that the entire school family is part of that. Now, I did have that person, the librarian, go to the teacher and told us, hey, go to the teacher, talk to the teacher, see if she kind of feels the same way and if she'll initiate a referral. And she did. And then we ended up going through the process for that child. Determination of eligibility. This process is a lengthy process and includes the whole team. You get feedback from the teacher, from the parents. You do testing in all the areas of concern. Of course, you need to get consent first, and you'll send a letter home to the parents asking for consent, and that consent has to be specific for exactly what you're looking for. If you're going to look at motor, that needs to be checked. If you look at communication, that needs checked. Every single area has to be checked. You can't just go in and do a sweeping evaluation without getting specific consent for each area. If you want to do a full one, you can if you receive consent, but it has to be very specific in that consent. Program planning. This is after you have went and completed your eligibility and all of your assessments, got all the feedback from the team. Then the team comes together and has a staffing or an actual IEP meeting, and you come and you get feedback from the entire team. And the team will consist of your LEA, your classroom teacher, your resource teachers. Sometimes you might have your school psychologist there, parents, anybody that the parents want to invite to be part of the team and invested in their child's education will be there as well. And then together you come up with a plan. It's very important that you're respectful to the parents as being, the person who knows their child the most, and understanding that, IEP meetings are team meetings. It's not a resource teacher coming in and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do, or the principal or, the classroom teacher saying, this is what we're going to do. I've been in IEP meetings where I feel like parents didn't really feel like they had a voice, and the IEP pretty much is already done. I've been in, one like that, and I've been in one where I've come in and the IEP clearly has draft, and we go through it as a team, and we're making changes, we're modifying, we're adding, and it should be a living document in an IEP meeting, and that shows respect for everybody on that team. Program implementation and evaluation. Research shows that the sooner that you can get that IEP in place, the better. And I know for me, I've had an IEP morning meeting at 7:45 in the morning, and I'm serving that child that same day. And that's the way I think it should be. And research shows that that does benefit the student. Evaluation is ongoing. Depending upon your goals, you're at least going to quarterly have progress that's done quarterly, and then also get feedback from the parents at least quarterly. And then some students, as they work on their goals, some of that monitoring might be even weekly, depending upon how intensive those goals are for that student. Parent involvement is crucial, and encouraging parents, to be a part of it. A lot of times as parents go through this process, they feel a bit lost. I know when I went through it with my son in the first IEP meeting, we went through that document and I didn't understand any of it. I was confused, and I was going into it, having a degree in social work and working in education for a while, and I was still very confused. A lot of the words and jargon I didn't understand at all. And it's given me the insight to know that when I go through the IEP with my parents and we look at it together, that I make sure and use layman terms. I make sure and chunk that into small pieces, because I have to understand that these are new terms to a lot of our parents. Now, when you go through gathering data to encourage parent involvement, is ask parents, for data as well, and you incorporate that with your data. And you get data from the teacher. But a lot of times, educators forget the important piece of gathering data from the parents as well. And it also is important in the assessment process on gathering data. You talk to the parents and say, hey, are you seeing this at home? What kind of concerns do you have? What's going on? Now, progress monitoring, you can involve parents in that, and you should. You might say, hey, Johnny is doing great. He knows, 24, of his letters already. We're getting close, and hey, mom, what are you seeing? And anytime that you can get your parents involved in the progress monitoring, it helps invest everybody in the process. Respect for culture is another way to increase parent involvement. I had an experience with this last week. I have a student who is Hmong, And so I talked to my SLP, and she told me, she's like, when you need to look at the Hmong language and you need to have an idea of what's going on before we go into this meeting. And I'm glad that I did, because I went into this meeting with an understanding of what's going on with um, the speech of one of my students who is Hmong, that he leaves off a lot of the end of the English words. And I know that because I went and researched it so I could be respectful to the culture. And when Dad said, yes, he does leave off the endings, and I already knew that that's also common in the Hmong culture, that the changing of their words is due to the inflection of the vowels in the middle, and they leave off the end of words. And so I knew that going into the meeting, and the dad seemed really impressed that I already knew this. And so we explained that, how great it is that their son is a dual language learner, and how, he's doing awesome, but sometimes getting some of this English down is a little bit difficult because he's trying to drop it at the end like he does in the Hmong language, but it will come around to it. And the dad was really, really impressed that we knew that. But my SLP guided me into researching that before the meeting. Seeking parent input, that is important. I know that I felt valued as part of the team for my son when his resource teacher came to me and said, hey, what do you have that works at home? What do you think we could do that help with your son? And I let him know right away, well, these are the things that bother him. These are the things that I do. He likes deep pressure. He likes, you put your hand on his head and push just a little bit. Same on the shoulders. That deep pressure. He likes compression hugs. Those work. And all those things they took serious. They took notes. We added a lot of those things and accommodations into his IEP. And it's important that you do that with your parents, because you have to respect them, that they are the person who knows their child the most. And so that is very, very important. Communication is important. That makes the parent feel involved and a part of this process, and not just kind of drug through this process. Ongoing communication. Drive scores. Um, Drive scores are important, and we need to make sure we keep those in mind. A lot of times it lets us know where we're at. STAY-9s, those are 9 segments and gives us a range of performance. And it's less precise than your percentiles and your standard scores, but some people like to use them. I have not seen those used in my work where I am at. Percentiles. Percentiles use raw scores to show us where our students are and those who score lower than them. And those really help as well to let you know. That's usually seen a lot in state testing and things like that. Standard scores are what I've seen the most in my environment at work. And this kind of lets you know, lets you transfer those raw scores into a scale score and gives you a standard deviation. If you have a standard score of 100 with a deviation of 15, the student that gets 115 is one standard deviation above their peers. If you have a student who gets 85, that they're one standard deviation under their peers. If you have a student who gets 70, they're now 2 standard deviations under. And for our school, that's when we pick them up as a SPED student, is when we do the evaluation process and we're 2 deviations under, we pick them up. So I think that's important. Those scores come into play a lot. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for a great semester.